Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Mayor Bowser's pre-summit conversation series for the upcoming National Maternal and Infant Health Summit. My name is Jason Wallace and I'm the director of the Mayor's Office on Fathers, Men, and Boys. And the countdown is on. Everyone needs to be excited because next week, Tuesday, September 15th, kicks off Mayor Bowser's third National Maternal and Infant Health Summit. This year's theme is rethinking our perspectives, retooling our actions. Please log on to dcmaternalhealth.com and register for this year's virtual event. So today, we're going to be talking about mental health, stress, and trauma. We know the toll that stress and trauma can have on our mental health and well-being, especially amongst our men and amongst our fathers, and more especially given the stigma that's placed on seeking mental health for men. So today we're joined by Drew. Hey, Drew.
How you doing?
And Dr. Span from Hurdle to shed some more light on this conversation. How about you guys introduce yourselves?
Good morning. My name is Drew Hubbard. Proud Ward 5 resident, long-term district resident, district government employee, father of two, and husband to an awesome member of this team that is putting on the summit, Dr. Faith Gibson Hubbard. I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. Dr. Span?
Yep. So just want to introduce myself a little bit. So Dr. Rufus Tony Span, graduate of Howard University.
Hey, Howard.
Yeah, I would say, sure you know. And then also just a little bit about my background. I've been doing clinical work for going on about 15 years. I'm also the Chief Clinical Officer for Hurdle, working with Black men, families, and couples. So yeah, nice to meet everybody.
Well, if we're going there, I forgot to mention a proud Morehouse graduate here. So, all right, HBCU.
Okay, HBCU family in the house. Howard, I gotta, shouts out to the Howard folks,
Right.
So let's jump right in. All right. So why is it important to talk about our mental health and well-being?
Yeah. The importance of talking about it is that we need to have more conversations about it because there's very little. Although we're thinking that we're making some shifts, we're doing that, right? So there's a cultural shift on where we would have been at. But at the same time, there still needs to be more conversations. When we do that, we're finding that people are feeling comfortable about talking about issues that are there. That's the only way that we're going to have it, is that we have to have more conversations. And so when talking about it, you realize, hey, I'm not alone, that somebody else over here is dealing with the same thing and that they're also getting help. And so I think that's the first thing that we have to do. We have to talk about it in a way that opens up the conversations that we think are challenging and realizing that we're not alone. Two, we also talk about how we're actually dealing with it. And so some may say they're dealing with it in a way that it's not helpful. They're not doing anything with it. And then others are like, hey, I'm actually getting some help. And so when we talk about getting the help and then how to get the help, that's the bigger difference. And the only way that we're going to get these things out is by saying, one, how's my wellness doing? So for Black men, we got to say, brother, how you doing? You good today? You all right? And it doesn't have to be like these deep, prophetic, clinical questions, but just check in with somebody and be like, how you doing today? And I think when you do that, you're getting people to actually open up and start the conversations. Then we go a little bit deeper and for that, but that's how I would start off and why we need to talk about wellness.
And I mean, that's a great point, but I see a lot of times, right? Like it looks like a sign of weakness, right? Like, so if you go to somebody and say like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or even going to somebody and saying like, hey, I want to do a check-in, how are you doing? For that person to not respond with just the word, oh, I'm fine, everything is good. Like, how do you do it in a way? Because isn't it like a sign of weakness? You think that?
That's like, so there's pockets of that. And, as men, we may say like, hey, no, you got it. You're good to go. Or, you should be able to carry that burden. And sometimes even for Black women, be like, oh, you're a strong Black woman, And so what we're saying is that you always have to be in a place of strength or empowerment. And the reality is no, or you can be in strength empowerment and still be vulnerable and weak. The reality is that we all have these ups and downs, even throughout our day or in our life. Like, I'm not always 100%. Right. And so I think when people realize that you can still show up and not be 100%, but that doesn't mean that you're not okay. Just because you showed up here today doesn't mean that you're in a good place. And so I think when we associate, there's a correlation too much on what is weakness and defining weakness. But we need to think about how do we change and culture shift and saying this is empowerment. Like having this conversation right now, brother, you are operating in empowerment by saying this to somebody that actually cares. So if we keep on pairing it with weakness, it's going to come out weakness. If we try to pair it as empowerment, it's empowerment. We can shift that culture and language and not embody what other people have tried to oppress on us.
I've found if there's a silver lining to this whole situation we're in, I appreciate my friends more than I ever have, because just being forced to do more things remotely. These are my good friends who we kind of just pass off being friendly as a once in a while thing, but we've been more deliberate about doing Zoom calls, doing some socially distant things, doing the check-ins, like you said, just dropping a line just to make sure you're okay. And we've gotten to a regular stance of doing that. It's been helpful, and just to have that group ask, and then just to hit certain people offline, hey, I need to talk. And we've done that more regularly than before the pandemic. So that's one silver lining that I think is a good thing.
Yeah. And I mean, we actually talked about this, the importance of just getting together and talking and not seeing things as weaknesses. What are your thoughts on that, Drew? What you talked about being weaknesses?
They're more like shared experiences.
Yeah.
I'm blessed that I have friends that I've had since day one of undergrad who we've kind of gone along the same lines life-wise, as far as getting married, kids, and we can relate and just without judgment sit down, either over a meal or just over the phone, and talk about what we're going through, how this is affecting us, how it's affecting our kids, and having that trust that's been built over decades of shared experience. Just to have that safe space to talk to other Black men has been a great thing, and we take advantage of it.
Got it. So, Dr. Spann, Drew and I were actually on an episode. The Office on Fathers, Men, and Boys, we have a web series called The Manuscript. And we talk about mental health for men. And Drew and I were on an episode around experiencing loss and how do men grieve in a healthy way. What are your thoughts on grieving as it relates for men, and how we can grieve in a positive way?
That's a good question. And so there's theory out there that say, like, typically human beings grieve in a particular way. Right. And so it goes from a place of denial, and it goes to a place of disbelief and anger. And then from anger, it goes all the way down to a place of acceptance. Right. And so for men, what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that that whole process is different. And it's different for each person in their own body. But it could also be particularly different for Black men being in a Black body, because even this year, if we think about the loss from Kobe Bryant all the way to Chadwick Boseman, this is a different experience for us, because what we're seeing is that some of the complications, some of the things that have happened, it is almost a disbelief to see that these young men have died at the age that they died at, particularly also passing on family and children. So I think for Black men, as we think about our processing, particularly because development and saying, like, don't cry, or this is what manhood looks like, or this is how you show your emotions, there could be more of an internalizing experience from that, which means, like, when you internalize your emotions and you don't let it out, you're sitting with all of that, right? Yeah. And so I'm glad to hear that you guys are opening up spaces and saying, like, man, let that breathe, let that out. And so however you let it out, if you have some spaces where it's healing and you're actually allowed to vent, cry, talk about your anger, that's important. But if you're not doing that, you internalize it, what happens, it can lead to depression. It can lead to certain places of anger, and it's not even associated with the situation. And you're wondering, like, why am I showing up like this in the wrong places? But getting a space to grieve, talking to somebody if you can talk to somebody, crying if you can cry, listen to some music if you need to listen to some music, whatever your protective factors, like church, spirituality, leaning on some brotherhood, leaning on fraternity, I don't know. But the reality is that you have to get that out, because holding on to it will only eat you up inside. And so whatever space you find, if that's talking to an older brother figure, that's to a mentor, finding that space is going to be important. And last but not least, if you need therapy, seek therapy, get a therapist. That space is a space that's going to be for you. Just make sure that the right therapist is the right therapist for you. But you got to get it out, and you have to go through a grieving process to a place of acceptance, and accepting that there was a loss, but at the same time that we can still honor that person by living our passion and living day to day.
And how does that, like, so the thing that struck me, right, is that you talked about, like, if you hold it in and it shows up differently in other places, and it could impact our spouses. And you hear this term now about, being strong women or strong Black women, and how, like, we're expecting them to always have the strength. Can you talk a little bit more about how men that don't seek therapy, how that impacts their spouse?
Oh, big time. I do a lot of couples therapy, and I have a lot of couples I'm working with right now. And so, it's not uncommon for the woman to show up in the therapy, but, like, I don't know what he's talking about. He bringing up some stuff about his mother. He bringing up some stuff that's time to make me his mother. And it's like, yeah, because that's some unresolved issues, right? And so I think when couples come in or people deal with each other, they're thinking like, I'm dealing with this person. It's not. You're dealing with like maybe 20 other people. And I try to tell people, get these people out your bed. It should only be you and your wife or you and your husband. Everybody shouldn't be in your bed with you. But the reality is that if you're not dealing with something, you're going to deal with the closest person next to you. So that may be your wife, that may be your husband. And I tell them, that's not your therapist. You should not cipher from them because you need some energy or you need something to be whole. You need to go where there's another well and tap into that source because that lady got something going on in her life, just like you got something going on in your life. And so we can't say like, oh, you're strong Black woman. Yes, that is the case or that can be the case, but it doesn't mean that you need to lean on her like she a tree. Yeah, let her be herself as much as she needs somebody to lean on. And then when it's time for the couple to lean on each other, you do that. But if you need some real serious help, you need to find a therapist for that or find somebody that can work through that with you.
Drew, have you noticed anything like this? I guess, we're in this stay-at-home posture and especially with young children, just feeling like needing to lean on the strong woman or while you're at home?
Well, it makes me think back to our pastor when we did our premarital counseling. And one of the things that stays with me, he gave us this as the analogy. This is our relationship, and you shouldn't open it up to anyone in without first making sure it's solid between the two of you, right? So I hate that it's come to this, but we've had to do that with our children just to make sure that we're able to make sure we're okay, so we can set an example and make sure that they are okay first. Secondly, but making sure that we are solid, and making sure that their needs are met, and that the fact that they're young and going through things that they don't understand, that we can help them work through that, but making sure that we're on a solid foundation first before we so we don't make any missteps. And so when we need to get them help, we can seek that too.
Yeah. You're going to say something, Dr. Span?
No, I was just saying it's nice to hear a brother talking like that, man. Like, Drew, I appreciate everything that you're saying, because as being head of the family, like, you're realizing that you and your wife have to keep it together. You guys have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, do some breathing before you can really get into the family situation. And it's good to hear Black couples talking like that. It's good to hear couples talking like that. And we need people to think about the wellness and staying well during these times, because people are stuck together.
Yeah.
People are together. Yeah.
We are stuck together.
For,
we've learned a lot about one another too. And my wife jokes that we've decided that not only do we love each other, we like each other. So it's been a good.
My wife says that too. She's like, it's a good thing that we like each other. Last year I did this poll on stage when we did the maternal infant health on the main stage. The poll was, I asked, how many mothers were in the crowd by a round of applause, and it was a roaring applause. Then I asked how many fathers were there, and it was only a few claps in the crowd. How important is it for fathers to not only just to come to the Maternal Infant Health Summit next week, but also be involved in the maternal infant health process? Well,
I want to say something, but I'd definitely like to hear what Drew has to say. I just want to say this. I want to dispel a myth about Black men and fatherhood. The CDC report that Black men actually do a lot better than most of our other counterparts when it comes to fatherhood and being a father, Black men. Now, our family systems may not look the same as other family systems. It may not be that everybody lives in the same house, but I tell kids when I work with them, you're still a family. It just means that you guys are living in different places. So people think like family has to be in the same house. That constitutes family. But if a Black man is showing up and being a father, he's being a father. And that's the bigger difference, in that we're shifting on how we look at this culturally. So my thing is, brother, if you're not in the house, you still should be showing up. If you're not with that woman, you still should be showing up for that child and for that family system. And so I think this is where we think, because it doesn't look like this, which it stopped looking a certain way back from the 1950s going into the 60s, doesn't mean that it's now still not a family. Doesn't mean that you're not a father. Doesn't mean that you're not a Black man that can help out and be there. We need to shift that narrative. We need to shift on how people are trying to place that on a culture where our culture looks totally different from other cultures. And we need to stop saying that we're not there, because we are. It just looks different. It seems different. It feels different. But like we have here Drew, and we also have you, Jason, both Black men, Black fathers. I live in a community where it's a bunch of Black men and Black fathers. I think we need to culture shift that a little bit more. And I appreciate what you both are doing with the podcast and the speaking and even having this conversation. We're here.
I mean, what you said was so important. I mean, the Mayor Bowser actually did an entire initiative based upon that CDC report and a few other reports that shows, how the media portrays Black and brown men or Black and brown fathers. And we did a campaign called Flip the Script, to where she put images of Black fathers on buses, metro stations, trains, all throughout the city. And took over DC. And it was so important because, two things, right? So one thing is that it gives, children something, when you see negative images of, of yourself, or people who look like you, it affects your self-esteem. And then two, if you're not of color and you don't have any friends that are Black men, what it does is that the images that you see on television, it becomes your reality. It works just like marketing. It works just like marketing. And it may not be dangerous for, average Joe, but if you are a police officer, if you're a judge, if you're a teacher, there are real life consequences to these negative images. So thank you for sharing that about that CDC report. Drew?
Yeah, and I brought up a kind of a good aspect of this time, but I think one of the more negative things I've noticed, and probably like me, I've been spending probably too much time on social media since, we've been in isolation. And, I won't call it a negative. It's kind of a split. I've seen a lot of good interaction from people I know, some people that I don't know, but I've also seen just a lot of, I'll just call it mess that's thrown out there. And it has to do with stereotypes. It has to do with people's perception of some of the social justice initiatives that are going on and portraying them a certain way and placing labels on people and groups that's unhealthy. But to back to your point, having just as symbolically these images out there that are positive is one thing, but then acting on being fully involved, I think is the next obvious step that has to be done. So I think we can't just rest on the images, but the action has to be there too. But they go hand in hand.
Exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. How is you guys' journeys been different pre-COVID versus right now as it relates to your own mental health?
I will say just probably pre-COVID, just wasn't as aware of being as introspective as I should be. I mean, I think I'm introspective naturally, but being more deliberate about kind of doing a self-check and finding an outlet we talked about earlier. And for me, it's been amongst my peer group and some conversations I've had with my pastor, but being more deliberate about kind of doing that self-check-in.
Yeah, same here. I think because of pre-COVID, I would be able to get out, socialize, be in my groups. But now during COVID, it's like Zoom has become like the room for everybody. And so for me, I found that I wasn't using Zoom the right way. One, because I thought it was a more professional platform, which it maybe start that way. But now socially, I get it with my family a lot more. It's on Zoom. Someday, hopefully we can get back face to face. I also get up with my fraternity brothers a lot more. Shout out to Alpha Phi Alpha. I was going to say me and my LBs, I actually lean on them a lot more because we're not waiting for that meetup. We're actually just getting online and just talking about, from them talking from fatherhood, talking about just, college days. But the reality is that we're using a space and time that breaks down barriers that we thought had to be there, but they don't have to be there. And so my wellness, because of that, has increased because I have a better connection to a protective factor that I wasn't tapping into, and that's my own community. So that's been big for me.
Yeah, I've noticed for me, it's like it's like the routine has been broken, right? I'm used to getting up, going to work, coming home, doing this for the family, and then going to sleep and doing it all over again. And it's easy when there's a routine to kind of forget to work, to do things for yourself or to grow or to learn or just enjoy life versus enduring life, right? So because the routine has been broken and now it's I got this gap of I'm not getting on the train right now. Oh, I'm not, going to be in the office and having the banter in the office. I haven't realized how much I needed that connection until it was lost, until it was gone. And I find myself talking to coworkers now more than I did when I worked next to them. I find myself talking to my family more often. I find myself talking to friends more often. And then like, if I go without it, I show up different. I show up different to work. I show up different to my family. So, I mean, it's so important that I've learned that like, that once we go back to normal, that, you know, to break the routine from time to time and to reach out to others and make sure I make that connection.
And I think you both mentioned it. And this is a great thing. I haven't talked to my family this much ever. And being more deliberate about getting on the phone, on the FaceTime or Zoom with both, you know, my side of the family, my wife's side of the family, making sure that our kids are able to interact with them. You mentioned it too. I've found a new depth with some of my fraternity brothers, shout out to Cap Outside, where some of those relationships, again, you know, in the past were more surface, more, hey, let's just get up and, you know, do some mindless kicking it. We've had some very deep conversations politically, you know, about the pandemic, about family, about faith that really didn't happen before this. And we've had, for good or bad, time to sit down and kind of, you know, some of them have been contentious, but they've been constructive too.
So as we wrap up here, I want to talk about resources and where people can get resources for mental health, for maternal infant health. And Dr. Spank, can you talk a little bit about Hurdle?
Yeah, sure. So Hurdle, the whole design of Hurdle is culture first. And so if you're coming to Hurdle, you're looking particularly for the DC metro area. So that's Maryland, DC, and Virginia. That's only where we're actually able to serve right now for actual therapy. But if you're coming to Hurdle for therapy, we're actually going to put culture first. What is that? Really getting down to the narrative view, lived experiences, understanding that from a cultural context, from a cultural lens, and then getting into also what brings you here today. But making sure that that's put first and working through any of those issues that are coming up from that lens. In addition to that, we do have self-care support that you can look through, and so the app will be coming out soon. And so we're looking at it from a holistic approach that can help with you know, what your lived daily experiences and having self-mastery. So that's meditations, that's going to be journaling, that's podcasts. And if you're also looking for a current resource now for Black men, there's Men Thrive, headed by Jeff Johnson. That's something that you can look into for getting some real-time information from him. But ultimately, Hurdle, we want it to be a game changer for, particularly for Black men and women right now, our first set of people that we're going to work with. We're getting some serious help that you need, and trust. We have a team of people that want to make sure that happens.
Awesome, awesome. Final words from my brothers?
Everybody say, stay safe, participate in the summit. It's going to be great. If you weren't able to participate last year, you will really enjoy and pull some good things from it. Just look forward to getting back to whatever normal is in the future.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, use your resources as tap into it, if it's either online or if it's virtual, if you're able to go to the brick and mortar. But the resources are here. They haven't stopped. You have great people that are here on the front line. You have great people that are working with the DC in the mayor's office. So tap into these things and get the support you need. That's how, as a community, we're going to get well and continue to move forward in the generations.
Thank you guys for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. And on behalf of Mayor Bowser, I wanted to thank everybody for watching. And as a reminder, be sure to visit dcmaternalhealth.com to register for this year's National Maternal and Infant Health Summit, which will be September 15th through the 18th. Again, that's dcmaternalhealth.com. You can also find information and resources on all things maternal and infant health in the district at that email address. I'm Jason Wallace. You can find me at men.dc.gov, and see y'all next time. Thank you.